Get out of my car. Claire Bennett pressed the unlock button with one hand and gripped the steering wheel with the other, her knuckles going white. The man beside her didn't move. I said get out. He finally turned to look at her, and that was the moment everything changed. If you're new here, please subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Claire Bennett had learned early in life that the worst decisions people make always start with good intentions. She had watched it happen enough times in the emergency wing of St. Marcus Hospital to understand that truth, the way other people understand gravity, not as an idea, but as something that simply existed pressing down on everything. She had seen the woman who drove her sister home from a bar and ended up in a ditch. She had seen the paramedic who stopped to help a stranded driver and caught a knife across his forearm for it. She had seen enough to know that the world did not always reward kindness. Sometimes it punished it. So when Claire first noticed the man standing alone on the shoulder of Ashland Avenue at 11:40 in the evening, in the middle of a thunderstorm that was dismantling the city, tree by tree and sign by sign, her first instinct was not compassion. Her first instinct was to press the gas pedal. She almost did. She was 3 minutes from home, 12 hours off her feet finally, a cup of tea and a bed with her name on it. The storm had already flooded 2 underpasses on her usual route, and she had rerouted twice, and her windshield wipers were losing a battle. They had been fighting since the previous November, and everything about the night was already too much. But she saw him. Not a flash. Not a quick impression through the rain. She actually saw him. He was standing very still. Not waving. Not trying to flag anyone down. Just standing there beside the road, the way a person stands when they have exhausted every other option and simply have nothing left to try. His coat was black and expensive, the kind that belonged in a different world than the one surrounding her, and it was completely saturated. The rain was running off him in sheets. His hair was flat against his forehead. He was not holding a phone. He was not holding anything. He was just standing there. Claire drove past him. She drove exactly 40 feet past him, and then she stopped. She sat with her hands on the wheel and the wipers fighting the rain and the heat from her vents, making a small circle of warmth that felt suddenly selfish, and she thought about the paramedic with the knife across his arm. Then she thought about a different thing, a memory from when she was 11 years old. Her mother's car breaking down on Route 47 in February. The heat, dying 20 minutes later. The two of them sitting in the dark, waiting for a tow truck that took 90 minutes to arrive. The cars that passed without slowing. The few that actually slowed and then kept going anyway. And the single one driven by a retired teacher named Harold Moss, who pulled over, gave them his emergency blanket, and sat with them until help arrived because he said it wasn't something a person just drove past. Claire remembered that. She put her car in reverse. She rolled down the passenger window as she pulled alongside him, rain immediately finding its way into the car and hitting the center console. "Hey," she said. The man didn't respond right away. He turned slowly, as if the idea that someone had stopped required a moment to process. "Do you need help?" Something moved across his face. Not gratitude. Something that came before gratitude, something closer to disbelief. "I need to get home," he said. His voice was low and measured, the kind of voice that didn't rise easily even in conditions like these, even soaking wet at the side of a road in the middle of a storm that was putting cracks in the city. "Where's home?" Claire asked. He told her an address. She knew the area, a private stretch of lakefront property on the north side, gated private. Not the kind of place that appeared on regular maps with any real detail. "That's 40 minutes, she said. "I know. It's almost midnight." "I know that too." She looked at him through the open window. He was looking back at her in a way that was hard to describe, not threatening, not desperate. Careful. The way someone looks at something they don't fully understand yet. "Are you hurt?" she asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. "No," he said, and then after a half second, "Not in any way that matters right now." That pause, that qualifier. She noticed it. But she was a night shift nurse, and she had long ago lost the ability to ignore the small things people said around the truth instead of inside it. She reached across the seat and unlocked the door. "Get in before we both drown." He got in. He pulled the door shut, and the storm became something outside again, instead of something happening directly to her, and the car filled with the smell of rain and cold air, and something else, something expensive and faint beneath both. He sat forward slightly, careful not to lean back into the seat. "I'll ruin your upholstery," he said. "It's been ruined since 2019, Claire told him. "Seatbelt." He looked at her. She kept her eyes on the road. He put on the seatbelt. She pulled back onto Ashland and headed north, and the silence settled between them, the way silence sometimes does between strangers, not uncomfortable, just present, a thing that acknowledged itself. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet. I've gotten lost going north twice tonight already, and the GPS keeps trying to send me into standing water." He almost smiled. She caught the edge of it in her peripheral vision. "I can navigate," he said. "You know a better route." "I know every route in this city." Something about the way he said it, not bragging, just stating, made her glance at him briefly. "That's a strange thing to know," she said. "I've had reasons to know it." "What kind of reasons?" Silence. Not the comfortable kind this time. "Business," he said finally. Claire nodded and let it go. She had spent 12 years working night shifts in a city hospital. She had long ago learned that people answered the questions they were ready to answer, and nothing she said would accelerate that process. If a patient wasn't ready to tell her how the injury happened, pressing them didn't help. You treated what you could see. You waited. She took the route. He directed her toward a series of side streets and one stretch of industrial road that bypassed all three of the flood-prone sections, and the drive went faster than she expected. "You weren't wrong," she said as the route opened up. "I rarely am," he said. And then after a beat, about navigation. It was almost a joke. Not quite, but almost. "I'm Claire," she said. Another pause. "Adrian? You live out here alone." "Adrian? No. With family. With employees." She glanced at him again, longer this time. He was looking straight ahead through the windshield. "What kind of business has employees who live with you?" she asked. "A complicated one. Most businesses are. Not like this one." She let it go again. But something was beginning to form in the back of her mind, a feeling she recognized from the hospital. From the moments right before something shifted, and the situation became something different than it appeared. She couldn't have named it yet. She just felt the leading edge of it and filed it away. The estate appeared through the rain about 8 minutes later. She had expected something substantial. She hadn't expected this. The gate was iron and stood at least 14 feet tall and stretched in both directions further than her headlights could follow. Beyond it, through the rain, the outline of a building that was less a house than an institution. Something with wings and height and presence, set back from the street behind a long approach that disappeared into the dark. And the guards. 3 of them materialized out of the rain, almost instantly moving toward the car before she had fully stopped. Men in dark clothing with radios and the specific kind of posture that comes from training rather than habit. Claire went very still. Not afraid, just still. The way she went still in the hospital when a situation announced itself as serious. "It's all right," Adrian said quietly beside her. "They're mine. They're mine." The way he said it. She watched as one of the guards reached the passenger window, and the instant recognition crossed his face. Not just recognition, but something more. Something that looked like relief and alarm combined. And he said, "Mr. Vascari, we've been—" "Not here," Adrian said. 2 words. Not loud. Just 2 words. The guard stopped speaking immediately. Adrian turned to Claire. "You can go," he said. "The storm is clearing to the east. Take Lakeshore back south, it's clear." She was still looking at the guards. "Claire." She turned. "Thank you," he said, "for stopping." His voice had changed slightly. Not in tone, but in weight. As if the words meant something that exceeded their surface meaning, though she couldn't have said why yet. "Everyone deserves someone to stop for them," she said. He looked at her for one more second. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the rain, and the guards closed around him immediately, and the iron gate began to move, and Claire sat with her hands on the wheel and watched until the last of them disappeared beyond the gate. She sat there slightly longer than necessary. Then she drove home. She made her tea. She changed out of her scrubs. She sat on the edge of her bed in the quiet of her apartment, on the third floor of a building that was old enough to have opinions about heavy rain, and she thought about the man named Adrian, and the guards who called him Mr. Vescari, and the gate that had swallowed him whole. She decided she was too tired to think clearly, and she would reassess in the morning. She was asleep within 12 minutes. 3 hours and 47 minutes later, someone knocked on her door. Claire came awake the way she always did, not gradually, but all at once, already moving before her eyes fully focused. 12 years of on-call shifts had eliminated her ability to ease into consciousness. A sound meant action. That was simply how she was built now. She sat up. The knock came again. Not frantic, not aggressive, just precise. 3 knocks evenly spaced. The kind of knock that expected to be answered. She looked at her phone on the nightstand. 3:42 in the morning. She got up. She didn't go to the door immediately. She went to the window first and looked down at the street. She saw 2 black vehicles parked below, not in the designated spaces, just stopped in the lane. Engines running, someone visible in the driver's seat of each. Her stomach tightened. She went to the door. She did not open it. "Who's there?" A pause. "My name is Adrian Vescari." She stood very still. She had heard that name before. Not from him, he had said only Adrian in the car. She had heard that name from a conversation between 2 surgeons 3 months ago. From an overheard fragment in the hospital waiting area about a man whose reach extended through 3 levels of the city. From the careful way people in certain parts of Chicago went quiet when certain subjects drifted too close to him. She hadn't connected it to the man in her car until this moment, standing at her door at 3:42 in the morning. She opened it. He was transformed. The soaking wet man from the side of the road was gone. What stood in the hallway instead was someone in a dark suit that cost more than her monthly salary. His hair dry now, his posture entirely different. Not the exhaustion she had seen in the car, but something contained and deliberate, the physical expression of complete authority. Behind him in the hallway stood 2 men. They did not look like assistants. "You're the Mafia boss," Claire said. She heard the intake of breath from one of the men behind him. Adrian's expression did not change. "That word gets used loosely," he said, "but it's the one that fits." A pause. "Generally," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you at my door at 3:42 in the morning, Mr. Vescari?" "Because someone tried to kill me tonight," he said. "Before you found me." She felt the words land differently than she expected. Not with alarm, she had moved through enough emergencies to have a higher threshold than most, but with a kind of gravity. The sensation of the ground, shifting slightly beneath what she thought she understood about the night. "Come in," she said. One of the men behind him moved forward. "Just him," Claire said without looking at the man. She kept her eyes on Adrian. Adrian said without turning, "Wait here." He stepped inside. She closed the door. Her apartment at 3:42 in the morning looked exactly like what it was, a place where a single woman who worked night shifts lived simply and without much interest in appearances. The furniture was functional. The bookshelf was overfull. There was a coffee mug still on the counter and a pair of work shoes by the door and a stack of medical journals on the kitchen table that she had been meaning to organize since September. Adrian stood in the middle of it and looked at none of it. He was looking at her. "Tell me what happened," she said. She moved to the kitchen and turned on the kettle because her hands needed something to do. "From the beginning." "I was leaving a meeting in Bridgeport," he said. "There were 4 of them. They knew my route, which meant someone gave it to them. My driver was killed. My security team was separated from me in the response. I got out on foot and ended up on Ashland in the rain." "Yes. You were running." He said nothing, which meant yes. "You said someone tried to kill you. You said they knew your route." She turned to look at him directly. You know who gave it to them. I have a strong suspicion. But not proof. Not yet. She turned back to the kettle. Why are you here, Mr. Vescari? She asked again. You could have told me that through the door. Because the people who attacked me know that someone stopped for me on that road. They have cameras along that stretch. They will find the footage. They will find your plate number. They will find you. Silence. The kettle was beginning to heat a low-sound building under everything. You're saying I'm in danger, she said. I'm saying you may be. Yes. Because I gave a stranger a ride home. Because you gave me a ride home. She absorbed that. She turned to face him fully. And what exactly are you proposing to do about that? I want to provide you with protection while my people locate the source of the threat and neutralize it. Neutralize it. Handle it. Permanently. He looked at her. When you say permanently, she said. I mean the threat will be removed, he said carefully. The specifics are mine to manage. She studied him. You came to my door at 3:42 in the morning, after I discovered that you are apparently one of the most powerful and dangerous men in Chicago, to tell me that you're going to protect me. Yes. Did it occur to you, Claire said evenly, to ask me first whether I wanted that silence? It was not a short silence. Adrian looked at her with an expression she could not entirely read, something between assessment and something quieter than that. Something she didn't have a clinical name for. Most people, he said slowly, don't question the arrangement. I'm not most people, Mr. Vescari. I've noticed. She pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. Sit down, she said. I'm making tea, and then you are going to tell me everything, not the edited version, not the version your lawyers would approve of. Everything. And then I'm going to decide what I want to do about my own safety. Do you understand? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down at her kitchen table next to the stack of medical journals. I understand, he said, and something shifted in the room. Something subtle but real, the way the balance between 2 people can shift in a single moment, without either of them moving. Claire Bennett, night shift nurse in her small apartment at 3:42 in the morning, had just done something that almost no one in Adrian Vescari's world had done in years. She had told him no. Not to his face, not with anger, not with a weapon in her hand. Just with a level voice and a question he didn't have an answer to, and he had sat down. She found out his name through her own search on her phone while the tea steeped. What she found changed the temperature of the room, at least inside her own chest. Adrian Vescari, 43 years old. The name appeared in connection with 3 separate federal investigations that had been closed without charges. It appeared in a long-form Chicago Tribune piece from 7 years ago that had been very careful about language, using words like alleged and believed to be connected to and sources familiar with the matter in ways that clearly communicated what they couldn't legally state outright. It appeared in a single court document from a civil case involving a shipping company that had since dissolved. The man at her kitchen table had a world around him that operated entirely outside the one she lived in. She set her phone down. She looked at him. He was watching her read. You looked me up, he said. You're sitting in my kitchen at 3:42 in the morning, she said. What would you have done? The same thing, he said. And now you're wondering what I'm going to do? Yes. She slid one of the mugs toward him and sat down across the table. Tell me about the attack, she said. Tell me exactly what happened. He looked at the mug for a moment. Then he told her. It came out without the careful lawyer language, without the editing she had expected. Either because it was too early for performance, or because something about sitting in this particular kitchen across from this particular woman made the usual barriers feel unnecessary. She wasn't sure which. He had been leaving a meeting with a man named Costa, a shipping associate, legitimate on paper, complicated beneath that. The route his driver took was one they had used a dozen times, which was a mistake in retrospect. 3 cars had boxed them in. The driver had been shot before Adrian fully understood what was happening. There had been a brief window, a gap in the coverage, a moment of chaos, and Adrian had moved through it on instinct. Alone on foot in a city dissolving in rain, How long have you been in this life? She asked. The question caught him slightly off guard. Since I was 19, he said. That's a long time to have enemies. Yes. And the people who attacked you, you think it was someone from inside. A pause. The route was private, he said. Only a small number of people had access to my schedule. That's not an answer. He looked at her. Yes, he said. I believe it was someone inside. Who? I don't want to give you a name until I have confirmation. Names have weight. Names have weight, she repeated. But you're willing to sit at my table and drink my tea. You haven't drunk yours either, he observed. She hadn't. She was holding the mug for the warmth, not because she was ready to drink anything at 3:42 in the morning while talking to the man sitting across from her. Mr. Vescari, she said. Adrian. She set her mug down. I want to ask you something and I want you to answer it honestly. I'll do my best. Why did you come here yourself? He looked at her. You could have sent someone, she said. You could have had one of those men outside knock on my door and explain the situation. You didn't have to come in person. Silence. I wanted to tell you myself, he said. Why? Because you stopped for me, he said. You stopped when no one else did. You drove 40 minutes out of your way in the middle of the night to get a stranger home. You didn't ask me who I was or what I did. You just stopped. He said the word again like it was unusual, like stopping was the exception and not what a person ought to do. And I wanted to look you in the eye when I told you that my choices may have put you in danger, he said. Because that's something you do in person. She looked at him for a long time. He met her eyes and didn't look away. Okay, she said quietly. Tell me what the protection would look like. He laid it out methodically. A two-person detail on rotating shifts outside her building. A second vehicle trailing her on any commute. A secured phone with a direct line to his head of security, a man named Daniel Torres, who Adrian described as the most careful person I've ever hired. A protocol for her hospital shifts specifically coordinated with what he described as a contact at St. Marcus, which implied something about the reach of his world that she chose not to examine in full at 3:42 in the morning. And how long does this last? She asked. Until I locate the person responsible and contain the situation. Contain. Yes. And if that takes weeks, then it takes weeks. And during those weeks, she said, I just live normally go to work, come home, while men with presumably very serious weapons wait outside my building. Yes. You see why that's a strange thing to ask someone. Yes, he said. I do see that. But you're asking anyway. I am, he said, because the alternative you refusing and going unprotected is not something I can accept. You don't get to decide what you can or cannot accept about my life, she said directly, but without heat. He sat back slightly. That's true, he said. You're right. She watched him say. It watched him receive the correction and absorb it without deflection, without the particular masculine reflex toward justification she had learned to expect from a certain kind of man in a certain kind of position. He just said, you're right. I have one condition, she said. Name it. Your people stay outside. My building, my car, my commute, fine. But my apartment is mine. My workspace is mine. Nobody comes inside unless I invite them. Done, he said, and I continue my life normally. Shifts, errands, everything. I'm not hiding in my apartment waiting for something to resolve. Also fine. And if at any point I decide this arrangement is over, she said, it ends. No argument. No security teams telling me it's too dangerous. My decision. He looked at her steadily. You negotiate like someone who's used to being underestimated, he said. I negotiate like someone who's read enough cases to know what happens when you give up your autonomy for someone else's idea of protection. He was quiet for a moment. Agreed, he said. All three conditions. She stood. Then we have an understanding, she said. He stood as well. How was significantly taller than she'd registered in the car in the dark. The overhead light of her kitchen clarified things. The sharpness of his features, the particular quality of his attention, that made you feel slightly uncomfortably, as if you had been fully seen. "I'll have Torres contact you in the morning," he said. "He'll give you the secured phone." "Regular hours," she said. "After 8. "Of course." He moved toward the door. She followed. He stopped with his hand near the door and turned to face her one more time. "Claire," he said. It was the first time he'd used her first name since she'd said it in the car. "Yes." "You weren't afraid of me," he said. "Just now. Most people." He stopped. "Most people are afraid of you," she said. "Yes." "I was informed," she said, "not afraid. There's a difference." Something changed in his expression. Something small, but not small. "There is," he agreed. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Claire." He left. She locked the door. She stood in the center of her apartment alone and listened to the sound of the hallway falling quiet. And then she went back to the kitchen and finally drank her tea, cold now, sitting in the chair where he had sat. She thought about the way he had said the word, "stopped," twice. She thought about the way he had absorbed her corrections without flinching. She thought about a man with an empire of fear who had come to her door at 3:42 in the morning and said in effect, "I owe you something I can't name yet." And she thought about herself, a woman who drove an old car and worked long shifts and lived simply, and had never not once asked the world for anything dramatic. Who had stopped for a man in the rain because a retired teacher named Harold Moss had once stopped for her mother. And she understood, sitting in her kitchen alone with a cold cup of tea, that the night she had thought was over, the moment she drove away from those iron gates, had not ended at all. It had, in fact, just begun. The secured phone arrived at 8:03 in the morning. Claire had been awake since 7, which was unusual for someone who had been awake until past 4, but her body had overruled her exhaustion with something that felt less like alertness and more like vigilance. A low hum of awareness that refused to let her rest past the point where she needed to start making decisions. She had showered. She had eaten toast she didn't taste. She had stood at her window and looked down at the street and confirmed what she already suspected, a dark sedan parked across from her building engine, off 2 silhouettes visible through the windshield. Not threatening, just present, watching. She told herself it was fine. She told herself she had agreed to this. She told herself that the arrangement was rational and temporary and entirely within her control. Then the knock came, and she opened the door to a man who was about 40, compact with close-cropped gray at his temples, and the measured stillness of someone who had learned long ago that most situations did not require urgency as long as you prepared correctly. He held out a phone in a small box. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Daniel Torres." "Come in," she said. "I'll stay here if that's all right," he said. "Mr. Viscari mentioned your conditions." She looked at him. "He told you. He tells me everything relevant to the security of people under our protection." "I'm not under his protection," she said. "I agreed to an arrangement. Those are different things." Torres absorbed this without any change in expression. "Noted," he said. "The phone is charged. My number is the first contact. If anything feels wrong, not dangerous, not confirmed, just wrong, you call me. I'll answer inside 1 ring." "What if I can't call?" "There's a single button on the left side. Hold it for 2 seconds. It sends my team your location and triggers a response." "A response." "People will come to wherever you are, quickly." She took the phone out of the box. It was slim and unremarkable looking, nothing that would draw attention. "How long have you worked for him?" she asked. 11 years. "And in 11 years, has he ever shown up at someone's apartment at 3:42 in the morning to tell them personally that they might be in danger?" Torres was quiet for exactly 1 moment. "No," he said. "He hasn't." She looked up at him. He met her eyes without elaborating. "The team outside will change at 8 this evening," he said. "You won't notice the transition. If you're going to the hospital tonight, text me the shift start time before you leave and we'll coordinate the route." "I know the route to the hospital." "So do we," he said. "Now." She wasn't sure whether that was reassuring or deeply unsettling. She decided it was probably both. "Thank you, Mr. Torres," she said. "Daniel is fine." "Thank you, Daniel." He gave a small nod and left. She stood in her doorway and held the phone and thought about the fact that she was holding a phone given to her by a man who worked for Adrian Viscari, while two other men from Adrian Viscari sat in a car watching her building because 3 days ago she had made a decision at a red light to go back for a stranger. Harold Moss, she thought. Look what you started. She almost laughed. Almost. She called her friend Renata at 9:15. Renata Ochoa had been Claire's closest friend for 6 years since they worked the same wing at St. Marcus, and discovered during a particularly brutal double shift that they shared the same humor, the same appetite for terrible reality television, and the same fundamental intolerance for people who pressed the elevator button repeatedly as if it would arrive faster. Renata answered on the second ring. You sound like you didn't sleep, Renata said immediately. I slept a little. How little? Define little. Claire. 3 hours roughly. It's your day off. What happened? Did Mrs. Petrakis complain about you again? I need to tell you something, Claire said, and I need you to not panic. A pause. The fact that you opened with that, Renata said carefully, has already made me panic. I helped a man last night. A stranger. He was on the side of the road. On the side of the road. In the rain. He needed a ride. Claire. I know. You picked up a stranger. I know. At what time? Around midnight. Claire Marie Bennett. I love you like a sister, and I need you to understand that picking up a male stranger at midnight in a rainstorm is not... He was the man they call Adrian Viscari, Claire said. Silence. The kind of silence that had weight. Say that again, Renata said quietly. Adrian Viscari. I looked him up after. He came to my apartment around 3:45 in the morning and told me that someone attacked him before I found him, that his driver was killed, and that whoever did it may have my plate number from street cameras. The silence stretched another 2 seconds. He was at your apartment, Renata said. Yes. Adrian Viscari was at your apartment. Yes. The man who... She stopped herself, started again. The man that people don't just Claire, that man does not just show up at people's apartments. He showed up at mine. What did you do? I made him tea and told him to sit down. Another silence, different in texture this time. You made Adrian Viscari sit down at your kitchen table, Renata said slowly. He was dripping on my floor. He was... Renata made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something that hadn't decided yet. Okay. Tell me everything. Claire told her. She left out a few things she didn't have language for yet. The way he had said the word stopped, the way his expression had changed when she corrected him, and he simply agreed. Those felt like things she needed to understand herself before she handed them to someone else. When she finished, Renata was quiet for a moment. You negotiated with him, she said finally. Someone had to. You told him what your conditions were. Yes. And he agreed. Yes. To all of them. Yes. Renata exhaled. I need you to hear me say something, she said. Because I love you, and because I am not someone who believes in burying the obvious thing under politeness. Go ahead. That man did not drive to your apartment at 3 in the morning because he felt guilty about you being in danger. Claire said nothing. He could have sent anyone. He said so himself. He has people. He could have had Torres call you or leave a letter or arrange things at a distance. He didn't do that. Renata. I'm not saying it's good, Renata said quickly. I'm not saying you should feel a certain way about it. I'm just saying you should see it clearly. Claire sat down on the couch. I see it, she said. Okay, Renata said. Good, because men like that, they don't do things without knowing what they're doing. And I don't want you to mistake knowing what you're doing for caring about you. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Claire said quietly. Renata paused. No, she said. I guess they're not. I'm not naive about who he is, Claire said. I'm a nurse. I've sat across from people in every kind of situation, and I've learned to see what's actually in the room with me. What's in the room isn't always what it announces itself as. What do you think was in the room with you last night? Claire thought about it honestly. A man who was genuinely surprised that someone chose to help him, she said, and didn't know what to do with that. She worked her shift that night. She arrived at St. Marcus at 10:55 and did her job the way she always did, precisely efficiently with the specific kind of focus that emergency nursing required, which was the ability to hold everything non-essential at a distance while you attended to what was directly in front of you. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. What she was less good at, she discovered, was not noticing the man standing near the elevator bank when she came off break at 1:15. I was wearing ordinary clothes and holding a coffee cup, and was indistinguishable from any number of people who existed in hospital margins. At that hour, delivery workers, family members of patients' administrators working late. Except she had seen his face before. She had seen it in the passenger seat of the dark sedan outside her building that morning. I wasn't doing anything. He wasn't watching her directly. But he was there, and she knew why he was there, and she stood in the hallway outside the break room for a moment and felt something she could only describe as the texture of her life changing. Not dramatically, not visibly. Just the way a landscape changes when a weather system moves in. The same shapes, different light. She went back to work. At 3 in the morning. During a brief quiet moment, she found herself sitting at the nurse's station and involuntarily thinking about what Adrian had looked like, sitting at her kitchen table next to her stack of unread medical journals. The incongruity of it. The sheer impossible incongruity of it. A man whose name people said in hushed voices, sitting in a wooden chair in her apartment at 3:42 in the morning, holding a mug of tea with both hands because the mug was warm. She realized she was almost smiling. She stopped. He called on the third day. Not Torres. Adrian himself. Claire was between errands. She had stopped at the pharmacy. Then the grocery store, trying very hard to perform normalcy in the face of a detail that moved with her at a distance, and she was sitting in her car when the secured phone rang. She looked at the screen. No name. Just a number she hadn't been given. She answered anyway. "It's Adrian," he said. "I know," she said. "Your voice is recognizable." A beat. "Is that a complaint?" he asked. "It's an observation. What do you need?" "I wanted to check in." She paused. "You're checking in," she said. "Yes." Does Adrian Viscari typically make personal check-in calls to people under protective arrangements? No. Then this is unusual. Yes, he said simply. She looked through her windshield. "Everything is fine," she said. "I went to the pharmacy. I'm about to go home. Your man at the hospital last night was good. I almost didn't notice him." Almost. "I'm a nurse. I notice things. I'm starting to understand that about you." She almost asked what that meant. She chose not to. "Have you found the person responsible?" she asked instead. A pause. Not the comfortable kind. "We're making progress," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the most accurate one I have right now." Adrian. She used his name without deciding to. "Who do you think it was? You said someone inside. You had a suspicion." Another pause longer. "There's a man in my organization named Marcus Bellini," he said. "He's been with me for 9 years. I trusted him with things I trusted very few people with. But some things in the past month have stopped adding up. Small things, financial discrepancies, a shipment rerouted that shouldn't have been, a meeting I was told about afterward instead of before. And now someone tried to kill you. And now someone tried to kill me. And you think it was him? I think it's very possible. What happens if you confirm it?" Silence. "What I always do," he said. "Which is, handle it. I notice," she said, "that you keep using that word. Handle, contain, neutralize. These are very clean words for things that I suspect are not clean at all." He was quiet for a moment. "You're not wrong," he said. "Then tell me plainly. If Marcus Bellini tried to have you killed, what happens to Marcus Bellini?" The pause this time was different. Not evasive. More like he was deciding something. "He loses everything," Adrian said. "His position, his finances, his standing, his freedom if I choose to involve certain authorities." And if you don't choose to involve authorities, then he loses those things in a different way. She understood what that meant. She made a choice not to press it. Not because she didn't have opinions. She did. But because she understood in the way she understood patients who weren't ready to tell her everything. Yet that pressing right now would close a door that was currently improbably open. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "Why are you calling me?" A pause. "I told you, to check in. You have a head of security who does that. You have a team of people whose job that is. You called me directly from a number that isn't even in the phone Torres gave me, so I'll ask again." She kept her voice level, curious without accusation. "Why are you calling me?" The silence this time was the longest yet. "Because you're the only person I've spoken to in 3 days who isn't either working for me or trying to kill me," he said. It came out differently than anything else he'd said. Less careful, less measured, more honest. Claire sat with that for a moment. "That sounds lonely," she said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out because it was true, and because she was someone who said true things when she noticed them. He didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was slightly different in a way she couldn't entirely name. "It has certain disadvantages," he said. "You built it," she said. Not unkindly, just honestly. "Yes. You built something that keeps everyone at a specific distance, and then you live inside that distance." That's a very precise way of putting it. "I'm a nurse. Precise is usually more useful than polite." Another pause, and then something that might have been the edge of a sound, not quite a laugh, but something that had considered being one. "I'm going to let you go," he said. "You should get home before the temperature drops further." "You know the temperature. I know a great many things about Chicago." "You know every route in the city," she said, echoing what he'd told her in the car. "Among other things." "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Claire." She sat in her car after the call ended, and she didn't immediately start the engine. She thought about a man with 9 years of trust in someone who might have spent those 9 years preparing to destroy him. She thought about what it cost to build something like what Adrian had built, and what it cost to maintain it, and what you surrendered in the process of surrounding yourself with people who feared you too much to speak to you the way she had just spoken to him. She thought about what Daniel Torres had said. "No, he hasn't." The phone was still in her hand. She started the car. The call came to the regular phone this time, the one she used for everything else, the one that lived in her jacket pocket and held her contacts and her alarms and her grocery lists and her photographs. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She answered. "Is this Claire Bennett?" The voice was male smooth, with the particular quality of someone accustomed to sounding more reasonable than he was. "Who's asking?" she said. "My name isn't important right now. What's important is that you understand your current situation better than you apparently do." She felt the quality of the air change. "I'm listening," she said carefully. "You've been spending time with Adrian Vescari," the voice said. "Or rather, his people have been spending time with you. Either way, you've inserted yourself into a situation that was very carefully arranged, and that insertion is something we need to address." She kept her voice completely neutral. "You were the one who tried to kill him," she said. A pause. Not of surprise, of recalibration. "You're perceptive," the voice said. "Why are you calling me?" "Because you're an unnecessary complication. A nurse from the South Side who happened to be driving the wrong road at the wrong time. You're not part of this. You were never supposed to be part of this." "I'm not part of anything," she said. "I gave a man a ride home, that's all." "That man is why my people are dead," the voice said, and for the first time the smoothness developed an edge. "3 of them, in the same operation where you found him on the road. 3 men with families. Because of Adrian Vescari. Because he always survives things that should have finished him." Something cold moved through her chest. Not fear exactly. The recognition of danger as a real thing rather than a theoretical one. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to walk away," the voice said. "Take his protection detail off your building. Stop communicating with him. Go back to your life. You do that and you remain entirely irrelevant to me." And if I don't? Silence. You're a night shift nurse, Ms. Bennett. Your schedule is fairly consistent. Your route to and from the hospital passes through 3 blocks that have very limited foot traffic after midnight. She understood what that meant. She didn't let it show in her voice. You just threatened me, she said. I presented you with your options, the voice said. The choice is yours. The call ended. She sat in the hospital break room, which was empty, and looked at the phone in her hand. Her heart was doing something systematic and fast. She did not pick up the phone Torres had given her. She did not call Daniel. She sat for 30 seconds, and she breathed the way she breathed in emergencies, the deliberate rhythm she had trained into herself years ago, and she thought clearly. Then she picked up the secured phone. She called the number at the top of the contact list. Torres answered inside one ring. Ms. Bennett, is everything? Someone just called my personal phone, she said. A man who didn't give his name. He told me to remove the detail from my building and stop communicating with Adrian. He implied that if I didn't, my route to the hospital wouldn't be safe. Torres's voice did not change in pitch, but it changed in density. What number did the call come from? Unknown. It won't be traceable, will it? Probably not. But we'll try. A beat. Are you still in the hospital? Yes. Break room. Stay there. I'm sending 2 additional people in right now. I don't want a scene at my hospital, Daniel. There won't be a scene. Are you all right? She thought about the question. Yes, she said. I'm angry, actually. More than afraid. That's useful, he said. Hold that. He ended the call. She sat in the break room and held the anger the way he suggested, like a tool rather than a reaction. Someone had called her personal phone. That meant they had her number. That meant the reach of this, whatever this was, whatever was happening inside Adrian's empire, extended further into her ordinary life than she had understood when she sat across from Adrian at her kitchen table and negotiated conditions. She had thought she was agreeing to temporary inconvenience. She was beginning to understand it was something considerably more serious than that. She told Adrian the next morning. He called at 8:15 again, from the direct number again, personal rather than through Torres, and she could tell immediately from the way he said her name that Torres had already told him. I know about the call, he said. I assumed. I owe you an apology, he said. She hadn't expected that. The detail I arranged was supposed to prevent this kind of contact, he said. That your personal number was accessed means the exposure is deeper than I calculated. I underestimated the reach of whoever we're dealing with. Marcus, she said. A pause. We haven't confirmed. Adrian. She kept her voice even. Stop protecting me from the details. I'm not someone you keep in the comfortable version of things. I'm a person whose personal phone just received a threat. I deserve to know the actual shape of what I'm in the middle of. Silence. Yes, he said. We believe it was Marcus. What has he built inside your organization? More than I realized, Adrian said, and the way he said it told her more than the words themselves. A tightness, not of anger, but of something that lived next to it. The particular pain of discovering that a person you trusted had spent years working against you. He has people at multiple levels, Adrian continued. Financial people, security people, possibly logistics. He's been building something in parallel with what I built, a shadow structure. For how long? Our best estimate is 4 to 5 years. 4 to 5 years, she said slowly. He sat next to you for 4 to 5 years and built something designed to replace you. Or eliminate me, yes. And you didn't see it. No. She didn't soften it for him. That wouldn't have served either of them. That means the people protecting me are also people you selected, she said. But some of your people are Marcus's people. Torres is not one of them, he said immediately. I'm certain of that. Certain how? 11 years, and because if Torres were compromised, I would have been dead before you found me on that road. She accepted that. But you can't guarantee the rest, she said. I'm working to verify everyone, he said. Torres is running the review. How long does that take? We're prioritizing the people closest to you. That's not what I asked. A beat. Days, he said. Possibly a week. She absorbed this. Then I want to know something, she said. And I want a real answer. Ask it. Is there any part of you that regrets coming to my door that morning, that told me the truth, instead of just arranging things quietly from a distance and hoping I'd never find out what was happening? The silence that followed was long enough that she thought for a moment he might not answer. No, he said. I don't regret it. Why? Because you would have found out, he said. People like you always find out. And if I had managed it from a distance, kept you in the dark, arranged things around you without telling you, and you had found out later, you would have had every reason to believe that I thought you were something to be managed rather than someone to be respected. She sat with that. And that mattered to you, she said. What I thought of you. Yes, he said. And then, as if the admission surprised even him, more than it should have probably. She let that sit where he'd left it. Find Marcus, she said. Find him quickly. And Adrian. Yes. When you do, think carefully about what you do next. Think about what kind of man you want to be when this is over. He was quiet. That's not a simple thing to ask, he said. I know, she said. Ask it anyway. She ended the call. She set the phone down on the table and looked at the ceiling of her apartment and thought about a man with a shadow empire inside his empire and a nurse in a small apartment who had accidentally placed herself at the exact center of a war she had never agreed to enter. She thought about Renata's warning. She thought about 11 years of trust and 4 to 5 years of betrayal running through the same building, the same hallways, sitting at the same table. She thought about what it cost to build something enormous and then discover that the cost was higher than you'd been told at the start. And she thought most of all about a single question that she hadn't asked Adrian out loud, but that had been forming in the back of her mind since the moment she opened her door to find him standing in her hallway. In that suit, what kind of man was he trying to become? Because that was the question that actually mattered. Not what he had built, not what he had done, not who feared him or who followed him or what his name meant when spoken in certain rooms in this city. But what he was choosing right now in the middle of the hardest thing he'd faced in years, with someone's loyalty proven false and someone's life accidentally made dangerous because of his and a woman at a kitchen table who had looked at him without flinching and told him the truth. What did he do with all of that? Claire didn't have the answer. But she was beginning to believe in a way that she hadn't expected to believe anything about this man, that he was actually asking the question. And in her experience, long shifts, hard cases, people at the edge of themselves, that was always where everything real began. Torres called at 6:47 in the morning, 4 days after the anonymous call to Claire's personal phone, and she knew from the way he said her name, clipped no preamble, that something had broken open overnight. We need you somewhere safer, he said. Today. Claire was already awake. She had been awake since 5, sitting at her kitchen table with coffee. She wasn't tasting, running through the same mental loop she had been running since the anonymous call. The voice. The smoothness of it. The way it had said her name, like a fact he already owned. Define safer, she said. A location we control. Adrian's asking. Adrian can ask me himself. A pause. Then, hold on. The line went quiet for 3 seconds. Then, Adrian's voice. Claire? What happened? She said immediately. She wasn't interested in preamble either, not at 6:47 in the morning. We found something last night, he said. In Marcus's finances. It's worse than we thought. How much worse? He's been in communication with a federal contact, someone he's been feeding information to for 2 years. She set down her coffee. He's been talking to the FBI, she said. Not to help them, Adrian said. To protect himself. He's been building a case selectively that removes me and positions him as a cooperative witness. He gives them enough to prosecute me. He gets immunity. He walks into what I built wearing my name. She absorbed the layers of that. The patience it required. The specific calculated cruelty of spending 9 years at someone's side while constructing the instrument of their destruction. He's not just trying to kill you, she said. He's trying to become you. Yes. And the federal contact, do you know who it is? We have a name. We're verifying. If you're right about all of this, she said slowly, then Marcus doesn't just have people inside your organization. He has legal cover. If you move against him directly, he triggers the federal arrangement. Which is why I can't move against him directly, Adrian said. And why I need you somewhere else today. Because the anonymous call to your phone wasn't a warning. She understood. It was a test, she said. He was testing whether you'd move me, watching how you respond, learning your defensive pattern. Yes. She stood up from the table. You want to relocate me so that whatever he's planning next doesn't have a fixed address to work with. I want to relocate you because you are not a piece on a board, Adrian said, and I don't intend to let you become one. She stood at her window. The dark sedan was still across the street. Where, she said. A building on the north side. Secure. Private. Torres will be there directly. I have a shift tonight. I know. You'll be taken and brought back. Your schedule doesn't change. My apartment. Locked. Watched. Everything there when you return. She thought about it for exactly the amount of time it deserved. Give me an hour to pack, she said. 40 minutes, he said. Please. She almost said something about the please. It landed differently than she expected from a man accustomed to giving orders that did not require courtesies. She decided not to comment on it. 40 minutes, she agreed. She packed fast and light the way she had learned to pack during the years when her hospital schedule required her to be ready for anything at any hour. Essentials. Nothing sentimental. She paused at the bookshelf and took one novel without examining which one she'd grabbed because the gesture felt important, even if she wouldn't have time to read it. She was at the door in 38 minutes. Torres was already in the hallway. The building was on the 19th floor of a residential tower with lobby security that acknowledged Torres with the practiced invisibility of long familiarity. The apartment itself was twice the size of hers, furnished cleanly and impersonally in the way of places prepared for occupants rather than inhabited by them. Everything present, nothing personal. She walked in, set her bag on the nearest chair, and turned around. Adrian was there. She hadn't known he would be. Torres had said nothing about it. He was standing near the window with his phone in one hand and the expression of a man who had been awake significantly longer than she had, which was a considerable distance given her own 5 o'clock morning. You didn't mention you'd be here, she said to Torres. Mr. Vescari asked to be here when you arrived. Torres said simply, and then excused himself in that efficient way he had of removing himself from rooms when the remaining occupants didn't need him. She turned to Adrian. He looked different from the last time she'd seen him in person in her apartment at 3:42 in the morning, in the suit that belonged to a different world than her kitchen table. Now he looked like someone who had been running a war from inside a room, which was essentially what he had been doing. The suit was equally immaculate, but the quality of his attention was different. Sharper. Strained at the edges in a way his face was too trained to broadcast, but that she caught because she was good at catching the things faces tried not to say. How bad is it? She asked. Because that was the more useful question than any greeting. Bad enough that I wanted to tell you in person, he said. Again with in person. It seems to be what I do with you. She sat down on the arm of the chair nearest to her, not quite settling, but not standing formally either. Tell me, she said. He sat as well on the couch across from her, and he laid it out in the direct way she had come to understand was how he spoke when he wasn't performing for anyone, when it was just him and a situation, and someone across from him who had made it clear that soft-edged versions of the truth were a waste of both their time. The financial trail Torres had found led through 4 shell companies across 3 countries. Marcus had been systematically redirecting money for 4.5 years, not large amounts all at once, which would have triggered alerts, but small, consistent redirections. Dozens of them accumulating into a fund that Torres estimated now held somewhere between $8 and $12 million. Money that Adrian had built, redirected into a structure that Marcus owned entirely. Beyond the money, the shadow network of people. 14 individuals confirmed so far, placed at levels across the organization that gave Marcus visibility into operations finances and most critically security protocols. Including Torres had confirmed that morning, a man named Garrett who had been on Adrian's personal security rotation for 2 years. Garrett had been the one to provide his route the night Claire found him on the road. Garrett, she said when he told her that. Yes. He's been removed. Adrian looked at her steadily. She held his gaze. Removed from the rotation, she said, deliberately, spelling out the meaning she was assigning to the word. Yes, he said. From the rotation. He's being held while we determine the full extent of what he gave Marcus. She accepted that. The federal contact, she said. You said you had a name. An agent named Whitfield, Adrian said. He's been receiving information from Marcus for roughly 2 years. He believes he's building a legitimate case. He doesn't know that everything he's received has been curated, that Marcus has been feeding him a specific version of my organization, designed to create maximum legal exposure for me while positioning Marcus as cooperative and essential. Whitfield thinks he's doing his job. Yes. He's being used. Completely. She thought about that for a moment. An FBI agent who believed he was pursuing justice being handed a manufactured narrative by the person who actually deserved investigation. If you go to Whitfield, she said slowly, you risk confirming everything Marcus has told him. You walk into that situation and you look exactly like what Marcus told him you were. Yes. But if you don't go to Whitfield, Marcus controls the federal piece of the board. Yes. So what's the move? He looked at her. I am still working on that, he said. She noticed that he said, I'm not we're. The distinction struck her. You don't trust everyone around you enough to work on it with them, she said. I don't know yet who around me I can trust completely, he said. Torres, 2 others I've verified personally. That's a small circle for a man who runs what you run. It's a smaller circle than it was last week, he said. Last week I thought it included Marcus. There it was again. That thing underneath the controlled surface. Not grief exactly, but something adjacent. The particular injury of misplaced trust, which was different from other injuries because it reached backward in time and contaminated things you had already believed were solid. She understood it clinically, but sitting across from him, she understood it as something else too. 9 years, she said quietly. 9 years, he said. I'm sorry, she said. He looked at her. People in his world did not often say that to him. She could see it in the way the words landed. You don't need to be, he said. I know I don't need to be, she said. I am anyway. Having someone betray you like that, it doesn't matter who you are. That's a real thing. He was quiet for a moment. Most people in my position, he said, don't get the luxury of calling it a real thing. That doesn't make it not real. It just means you've been forced to process it differently. Processed, he said. That's a very clinical word. I'm a nurse, she said. We translate things into clinical language so we can function inside them. Doesn't change what the underlying thing is. He looked at her with that particular quality of attention. She had noticed the first time the sense of being fully seen, which was slightly uncomfortable, and something else beneath the discomfort. You do that too, he said. You translate. Everyone does. No, he said. They don't. Most people just react. I react, she said. I just do it after I understand what I'm reacting to. He was quiet. Then, can I ask you something? You own the apartment I'm sitting in, she said. You can ask. Something moved across his face that was almost amusement. When you found me on the road, he said, before you knew anything about me, what did you actually see? She thought about it honestly. A man who had stopped trying, she said. Not stopped fighting, stopped trying to manage how he looked. That's different. Most people, when they're in trouble, they're still performing. Keeping the version of themselves intact. You weren't doing that. You were just standing there. He was quiet for a moment. I was, he said. I was. That's what made me stop, she said. Not the rain, not the coat. The fact that you were just there. Unperformed. He looked at her with something she couldn't name and didn't try to. Nobody has ever put it that way, he said. Is it accurate? More than anything else anyone has said to me in a long time, he said. The room held that for a moment. Then his phone vibrated on the cushion beside him, and the moment closed, the way moments close, and he looked at the screen, and something shifted in his face. Torres, he said, and answered. She watched his face while he listened. What she saw happened there. The stillness that arrived over it. The particular quality of composure that people developed when they had learned to absorb bad news without the reaction showing told her the call was serious before he said a single word. He ended the call. He looked at her. Marcus moved, he said. It had happened 40 minutes earlier while they were talking. A man named Patrick Souza, one of Adrian's senior logistics managers, a 20-year veteran of the organization. Someone Torres had cleared in the internal review had been found in his car 3 blocks from the building where Marcus had been operating his parallel structure. Not hurt. Alive. But with a phone that wasn't his own and a message on it that made Torres's team understand in a single reading what Marcus had been building toward. The message wasn't for Souza. It was intended to be found once Souza was found by whoever responded. A message designed to be read as evidence, screenshots, financial records, communications, all of it crafted to implicate Adrian in a series of specific criminal acts that Torres told Adrian flatly were fabrications, but fabrications built on real events twisted at the documentation level to point in the wrong direction. Marcus wasn't waiting anymore. He was accelerating. He's pushing the federal piece, Adrian said. He was standing now, the phone in his hand, the composure still in place, but with a different quality beneath it, not cracking, but pressurized. He's going to give Whitfield everything at once. Force a move before we can counter. How long do you have? She asked. Torres thinks hours, maybe less. She stood as well. Then you need to get to Whitfield first, she said. I already told you why that's dangerous. I know what you told me, she said. I'm telling you that dangerous is now your only direction. Every other direction is closed. You either walk into that conversation yourself and control what version of you Whitfield meets, or Marcus does it for you, and the version Whitfield meets is the one Marcus designed. Adrian looked at her. If I go to Whitfield, he said carefully, and I walk in there without a lawyer, without a structured approach, then get a lawyer and get a structured approach in the next 2 hours, she said. You told me you have people who verify things, people who run reviews, people who handle complicated problems. Put them on this. Now, not hours from now. He stared at her. You're telling me how to manage a federal exposure situation, he said. I'm telling you to stop standing here talking to me and start making the calls you need to make, she said. I'm not going anywhere. The building is secure. Torres is here. Go do what you need to do. He looked at her for one more second. Then he called Torres. She heard the conversation from across the room, not every word but the shape of it. Instructions delivered with the precision she had come to understand was how Adrian functioned when he was fully inside a situation-specific fast, no redundancy. An attorney named Brennan. Someone else named Price. A meeting location. A timeline that Torres confirmed was achievable. He lowered the phone. I need to leave, he said. Go, she said. Go, she said again. He picked up his jacket from the arm of the couch. He stopped at the door. Claire? Yes. What you said, about walking in and controlling what version he meets. It's basic communication, she said. The person who arrives first to any story shapes it. You know that. I do know that, he said. I've known it for 20 years. Then you already had the answer. You just needed someone to say it out loud. He looked at her with that expression she had been unable to name since the first night, the one that was not gratitude but lived in the same neighborhood. Then he left. She spent the next 4 hours in the apartment alone, which was not as hard as it might have been because she had spent a great deal of her adult life learning how to exist usefully inside uncertainty. Hospital shifts did that. The hours of waiting for test results. The hours of not knowing and having to function anyway. She read 30 pages of the novel she had grabbed without looking. She called Renata, who listened to the abbreviated version, and said with characteristic directness, Claire, You are in the absolute center of something enormous, aren't you? It appears so, Claire said. Are you scared? She thought about it. I'm focused, she said. That's a nurse answer. Yes. I love you, Renata said. Call me when it moves. She did her shift that night. Torres took her and brought her back two-car convoy smooth and uneventful. Her colleagues at the hospital knew nothing. The man near the elevator bank was a different face than the night before, but the same posture, and she registered him and moved on. At 2 in the morning, the secured phone rang. Adrian. How did it go? She asked immediately. Brennan was good, he said. His voice was different, still controlled, but with something released in it the way air releases from a tire that's been overpressurized. We met Whitfield for 2 hours. I brought the financial documentation Torres had compiled. The real trail, not Marcus's version. And Whitfield. He's a careful man, Adrian said. He didn't commit to anything, but he listened. He looked at what we brought. He asked questions that were not the questions of someone who's already decided. He's re-examining. He's re-examining, Adrian confirmed. That's not nothing, she said. No, it's not nothing. A pause. Marcus doesn't know I went. He'll find out soon, but he doesn't know yet. That's your window, she said. Yes. She heard him breathe. You were right, he said, about arriving first to the story. I know, she said. Not arrogantly, just honestly. A sound that was unambiguously a short laugh this time. Brief and real. Get some sleep, she said. I will. Claire. Yes. Thank you. And the weight in those 2 words again, the same weight they had carried the first night in the car before she knew who he was. But denser now. More inhabited. Don't thank me yet, she said. Echoing what she had said to him from the driver's seat the night none of this had started yet. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you remember. I remember everything, she said. Good night, Adrian. The confirmation came 36 hours later, and it came through Torres, not Adrian, which told her before Torres said a word that the news was not straightforward. We found Marcus's location, Torres said. He had come to the apartment in person, which was another signal. Torres did not deliver good news in person. He delivered things that required a human being in the room. She sat down. Tell me, she said. He's been using a property on the south side. We've had eyes on it for the past 18 hours, Torres paused. Claire, he's not alone there. She looked at him. He has a woman with him, Torres said carefully. And before you ask, she's not there voluntarily. The cold that moved through her chest this time was different from the cold of the phone call. This was sharper, more specific. Who? She asked. Torres looked at her, and she understood before he said the name. She understood from the way he was looking at her, the careful, direct look of someone about to say a thing they had hoped not to have to say. Renata Ochoa, Torres said. She was picked up this evening outside her building. Claire stood up from the chair. Everything happened very fast inside her in the span of about 2 seconds, and then it organized itself into something functional, because that was what she did. That was what she had always done. She picked up the secured phone. She called Adrian. He answered on the first ring. I know, he said, before she said anything. I just found out. I'm coming to you now. You listen to me, she said. Claire, you listen to me right now. Her voice was steady, level, the emergency room voice, the voice that had talked panicking people through the worst nights of their lives. She is my best friend. She has nothing to do with any of this. She exists in this situation because she knows me. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Yes, he said. I understand. Then I want you to understand something else. She stopped. She breathed. I am not asking you to get her back. I am telling you. Silence. I'll be there in 12 minutes, he said. He was there in 9. He came through the door with Torres behind him and 2 men she hadn't seen before. Different posture, different weight. The specific quality of people brought in for a specific purpose. He looked at her face. She looked at his. "What does he want?" she said. She kept her voice at exactly the level she needed it to be. Not lower, not higher. "He called while I was driving," Adrian said. "He wants a meeting. He wants me to come alone to the South Side location. He says if I agree, the woman goes free. And if you don't agree?" Adrian's jaw tightened once. "He says we'll find out." She held that. "You're not going alone," she said. "I know. Because if you go alone, you walk into whatever he built for you there, which is exactly what he wants." "I know," Adrian said again. "We're not doing it that way." "Then what's the play?" He looked at her for a moment. Something moved across his face, not hesitation, but something like it. The pause before a decision made, past the point of uncertainty. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to think before you answer." "Ask it." "I need you to make a phone call," he said. "Not to Marcus, not to anyone in my world." She waited. "I need you to call Whitfield," he said. "Directly, as yourself, as someone who has nothing to do with any organization, who simply has information about a kidnapping in progress and the location where it's occurring." She understood immediately. If Adrian's people called Whitfield or went to any federal contact, it looked like a maneuver. It looked like the story Marcus had told Whitfield Adrian, using law enforcement as a tool, manipulating the system, doing exactly what Marcus had been framing him as doing. But if Claire called a civilian nurse with no criminal record and no affiliation calling to report a kidnapping at a specific address, "Whitfield responds to the kidnapping," she said, "as a law enforcement matter, independently of you." "Yes." "He finds Marcus there. He finds Marcus there with your friend, with the weapons Marcus has on site, and with the financial devices Torres has been tracking that contain the actual record of what Marcus has been building." He paused. "It's all there. At that location. We've confirmed it. You want the federal piece to close on Marcus instead of you. I want the truth to be what Whitfield finds," Adrian said, "without it coming through me." She looked at him. "You could have arranged this without me," she said. "You could have had anyone make that call." "No," he said. "I couldn't." "Why?" "Because Whitfield met you," he said. "When I went to his office with Brennan, he asked about you. He'd already found your plate, your name, the record of what happened that night. He said—" Adrian stopped. "What did he say?" "He said you were the only person adjacent to this situation who looked like they didn't know what they were getting into." She held that for a moment. "He trusts me because I'm ordinary," she said. "He trusts you because you're real," Adrian said. "Because everything about you is exactly what it appears to be. No organization, no angle, no arrangement. Just a woman who stopped for a stranger and ended up in the middle of something she didn't choose." She thought about Renata. Renata who had said "I love you" and "call me when it moves." Renata who had warned her with the particular wisdom of someone who cared about her not to mistake knowing what you're doing for caring about you. Renata who was in a building on the South Side because she was Claire's best friend and someone had decided that was a usable fact. "Give me one," gave it to her. She took a breath. She made the call. Whitfield answered on the third ring, and she told him her name, and she gave him the address, and she told him what she knew. In the plain and direct way, she knew how to say things without angles, without arrangement, because there were none. She was exactly what she appeared to be. She always had been. When she ended the call, she looked up, and Adrian was watching her with an expression she finally had a name for. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't strategy. It was the way a person looks at something that restores quietly and without ceremony. Something they had stopped believing still existed. "Go get my friend back," she said. And this time, she did not have to tell him twice. Whitfield moved fast. That was the first thing Torres reported back 40 minutes after Claire ended the call, that the FBI had mobilized a response team inside 20 minutes of her call, which told Adrian something important about how seriously Whitfield had been taking the case all along, and how ready he already was to move the moment someone handed him a clean civilian-sourced address. Claire sat in the apartment and waited. She was good at waiting. She had spent years of her professional life learning that waiting was not passive, that waiting done correctly was its own kind of work. You stayed present. You stayed functional. You did not allow the mind to race ahead to outcomes that hadn't happened yet, because the mind's projections were always less accurate than what actually arrived. She drank water. She stood at the window. She did not look at her phone more than once every few minutes. Torres was in the hallway. Two other men she had learned to identify by posture, if not by name, were stationed at either end of the corridor. At 9:47, her regular phone rang. Renata. She answered before the second ring finished. I'm okay. Renata's voice tight and unsteady, in a way that Claire had never heard from her in 6 years of friendship, not through bad shifts or bad days, or any of the things that had tested both of them. Claire, I'm okay. There are people here, federal people, and I'm okay. I know, Claire said. Her voice was steady, because Renata's needed someone steady to connect to. I know you are. Where are you exactly? Some building. They have me in an ambulance outside. They're checking me over. I'm fine physically, I just... A pause. The sound of Renata trying to collect herself. There was a man. I know. He didn't hurt me. He kept saying he wasn't going to hurt me, he just needed me to stay. But Claire... Another pause. He knew your name. He knew everything about you. He talked about you like he had been watching you for weeks. He had been... Claire said quietly. What is happening? Renata said. Not panicking, just needing to understand. What is happening to your life right now? Something I didn't choose, Claire said. But something I'm in the middle of. And you're out of it now. You're out of it completely. Are you out of it? She didn't answer immediately. Claire. Not yet, she said. Renata was quiet for a moment. That man they have in handcuffs, Renata said. The one they came for. He's the one who did all of this. Yes. He looked at me like I was a prop, Renata said. Like I was something he picked up to use, not a person. I know. Is that what Adrian Vescari looks at people like too? The question landed with the precision of something thrown by someone who knew exactly where to aim. No, Claire said, and she meant it. He doesn't. Renata was quiet again. I want to see you tonight, she said. Tomorrow, Claire said. I promise. Tomorrow, face to face, everything. Everything. Everything I can tell you. That's a nurse answer again. I know. I love you, Renata said. I love you too. Go let them check you out properly. She ended the call. She sat with the phone in both hands and felt the specific relief of the worst outcome not occurring. Not a triumphant feeling, not joyful, but the deep particular relief of a door closing on a terrible possibility. Renata was safe. Renata was in an ambulance being checked by people whose job it was to make certain she was all right. The rest was still moving. Adrian called at 10:22. Marcus is in federal custody, he said. She closed her eyes for 1 second. And your people, she asked. The ones at the location. They were not there when Whitfield's team arrived, Adrian said carefully. They were handling a separate situation. She understood what that meant. She chose not to examine it. Renata called me, she said. She's physically fine. I know, Torres confirmed. A pause. I'm sorry she was involved. She was involved because of me, and I was involved because of you. Yes, he said. He didn't deflect it or cushion it. I know. What happens now, she said, with Marcus, with the federal situation? Whitfield found everything at the location, Adrian said. The financial devices Torres tracked, documentation of the shadow network, and the actual record of communications between Marcus and his federal contact, which makes it clear unambiguously that Marcus was running a selective disclosure operation, feeding curated information to build a specific legal outcome. Using Whitfield, she said. Using Whitfield, who to his credit does not appear to be a man who takes being used with any degree of equanimity. So Whitfield is angry. Whitfield is very professionally and very quietly furious, Adrian said, which in my experience is considerably more dangerous than the loud version. She almost smiled. The investigation into me, she said. What happens to that? Brennan is handling the legal side. It won't disappear entirely, that's not how these things work. But the shape of it changes entirely when the primary source is the person currently in federal custody for kidnapping, weapons charges, and financial crimes spanning 4.5 years. Marcus told a story about you, she said. And now the person who told the story is the story. Yes. She leaned back. You built this carefully, she said. We built it carefully, he said. She noticed the we. Is it over? She asked. A pause. The immediate danger is over, he said. The larger picture, my organization, the internal damage Marcus caused, the people who need to be removed, the trust that needs to be rebuilt, that work takes longer. Months. Months, he said. Possibly more. And the federal exposure truly. Brennan estimates the investigation redirects almost entirely within 30 days, given what Whitfield found tonight. There are things in my history that will always carry risk. I'm not going to pretend otherwise to you. She appreciated that. The refusal to hand her a clean ending when the reality was textured. Come here, she said. When you can. I want to talk to you in person. A pause. Tonight, he said. Tonight, she said. It doesn't have to be early. It wasn't early. He arrived at 11:58, and Torres stayed in the hallway without being asked, and Adrian came through the door alone, looking like a man who had been through 30 hours of concentrated intensity and was still standing, which she supposed was the best that could be said for any of it. She had made tea. She set a mug on the table in front of him. He sat down. He looked at the mug. He looked up at her. You made me tea again, he said. It's what I do when people need to sit down and talk, she said. She sat across from him. And you need to sit down and talk. I need to sit down, he agreed. I'm less certain about the talking. That means you're more certain than you think. He almost smiled. She waited. He wrapped both hands around the mug the way he had done the first night at her kitchen table for the warmth she had noticed. Not because he was cold, because it was grounding. Something physical to hold while the interior work happened. Marcus is going to tell everything he knows, Adrian said. He'll cooperate fully with federal prosecutors in exchange for whatever reduction in charges Whitfield's office agrees to. Which means the next few months will involve a great deal of information about me and my organization entering the federal record. Some of which is accurate, she said. Not a question. Some of which is accurate, he confirmed. Yes. She nodded. And what are you going to do about that? She said. He looked at her. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I asked, she said. Not legally. Not strategically. What are you going to do about the fact that there are accurate things in what Marcus tells them? He was quiet. The kind of quiet that meant the question had reached something real. I've been thinking about that since you asked me, he said slowly. On the phone that morning. What kind of man do I want to be when this is over? And he set down the mug. I built something, he said. I built it the only way I knew how to build anything at 19 years old, with nothing, and a city full of people who would have taken everything from me if I'd given them the opportunity. Fear was the architecture. Fear was the first language I learned that anyone actually listened to. She said nothing. She let him have the space to say it. And it worked, he said. For a long time it worked exactly as designed. People were protected who needed protection. Money moved that needed to move. Situations were managed that would have gotten significantly worse without management. But, she said, but fear is a terrible foundation for anything you want to last, he said. It works until the moment someone decides the thing they're afraid of is less frightening than the opportunity in front of them. And then you have Marcus. You have someone who spent 9 years at your side protected by the same fear that protected everything else, waiting for the moment the calculation shifted. He wasn't afraid enough, she said. Or he was afraid of the wrong thing, Adrian said. He was afraid of failure, afraid of being second, afraid that everything he'd helped build would always be mine and never his. And that fear, his fear, was bigger than mine. She looked at him. You've been thinking about this seriously, she said. "Since the night at your kitchen table," he said. "Since you sat across from me and told me to think about what kind of man I wanted to be. I've been running it the whole time. What did you come up with?" He was quiet for a moment. "I want to give Torres control of the security operation," he said. "Formally. Not as a delegation, as a structure. With accountability. Rules of engagement that I set, and he enforces, and that apply to everyone including me." She listened. "The financial side," he continued. "There are 3 legal businesses that have been used as fronts. I want to make them actually legitimate. Real businesses, real employees, real revenue. It takes longer. It makes less money in the short term. But it makes something that actually belongs to people, instead of something everyone is just afraid to touch." "That's not a small thing," she said. "No. People inside your organization will resist it. Some will leave," he said. "Some will resist, and I'll have to decide what to do with the resistance. But the people who stay, because the organization is worth staying in, because it offers something besides protection through fear, those are the people worth building with." She watched his face while he talked. She was watching for the thing she always watched for, the gap between what people said and what they meant, the place where the performance lived, distinct from the reality underneath. She had been watching for it since the first night, and she had not found it yet, which was its own kind of answer. "And Marcus," she said. "What happens when he gives his testimony, and some of what he says is true, and people come for you with the accurate parts? Then I face it," Adrian said. "Brennan will do what lawyers do. But I'm not going to fight truth, not anymore." She looked at him steadily. "That's going to cost you," she said. "Yes." "Significantly." "Yes." "And you're making that decision," she said. "Not because it's the smart strategic move, because you actually mean it." He met her eyes. "Yes," he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over his. It was brief. A few seconds. She pulled it back. But it happened. He looked down at the table where her hand had been, and then back up at her, and something in his face was different. Not overcome, not demonstrative, just different. Quietly, irreversibly different. "That's the first time anyone's done that," he said, "without wanting something from me." "I know," she said softly. He picked up his mug. She picked up hers. And they sat together in the quiet of the apartment at 11:58 in the evening. 2 people from entirely different worlds drinking tea while the city moved around them without knowing anything about either of them. Brennan called the next morning with the first concrete news. Whitfield had officially opened a parallel investigation into Marcus Bellini. The charges were federal kidnapping, conspiracy, financial crimes, and the new one that Brennan said with particular satisfaction: obstruction of justice for the deliberate manipulation of an ongoing federal investigation through fabricated evidence. That last charge, Brennan explained, carried the longest potential sentence. Marcus spent 4 years building a legal trap for Adrian. Brennan told Torres, who relayed it to Claire, because Adrian was in a meeting with people she hadn't been introduced to. He built it so carefully that it sprung on himself. When Torres told her that, she was quiet for a moment. "Not poetic justice," she said. "Just justice." "Same thing sometimes," Torres said. She thought about that. "How is he?" she asked, meaning Adrian. "Focused," Torres said. "Working. He's been on calls since 5 this morning." "Is he sleeping?" Torres paused almost imperceptibly. "Less than he should be," he said. "Tell him I said to sleep," she said. Another pause. "I'll tell him," Torres said. "Does he usually listen when people tell him things like that?" "No," Torres said. "But he listens to you more often than he listens to anyone else I've seen in 11 years. She said nothing to that. "Thank you, Daniel," she said. "Of course." She went to work that evening. Her shift. St. Marcus, the same hallways, the same rhythms, the same particular physics of a hospital at night when the pace changed but never stopped. The man by the elevator bank was there, a different face again, but the same posture, and she registered him and moved on. She was good at moving on. She was good at being present in the place she was needed, which right now was a hospital with patients who had nothing to do with Adrian Viscari or Marcus Bellini, or anything that had happened in the past 2 weeks. At 4 in the morning, during the quietest stretch of the shift, one of the other nurses, a young woman named Kim, who had been at St. Marcus for 8 months and was still in the phase of finding her footing, stopped beside her at the station and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," Claire said. "How do you do it?" Kim asked. "Stay calm. When everything's going wrong with a patient, you just shift into this other mode." Claire thought about how to answer honestly. "You stop thinking about the whole thing," she said. "You think about the next specific action, just the next one. The breathing, the line, the pressure, whatever is directly in front of you. The whole picture is too big to hold and function inside. You hold one thing at a time." Kim was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like something you figured out outside of work too," she said. Claire looked at her. "Sorry," Kim said quickly. "That was personal." "It's fine," Claire said. "And yes, it works outside of work too." She drove home at 6:15 in the morning, the city coming to life around her, in the particular way Chicago came to life gradually, and then all at once the early walkers and the delivery trucks and the specific quality of a sky that was not yet decided about what kind of day it intended to be. She was 2 blocks from the apartment building when her regular phone rang. Unknown number. Her stomach tightened. She answered. "Ms. Bennett." A man's voice. Careful. Professional. "My name is Whitfield, FBI. I believe you called me 2 days ago." She exhaled. "Agent Whitfield," she said. "Yes." "I'm calling to thank you," he said, "directly, for the information you provided, and to let you know that the individual you reported is in federal custody, and that the threat to you and people connected to you has been formally neutralized." "I heard," she said, "about the charges." "I also want to say something else," Whitfield said. "Off the record if that's all right with you." "All right," she said. "When I spoke with Mr. Vescari 10 days ago, I was already aware of you. The plate, your name, what happened on Ashland Avenue." "He told me," she said. "I've been doing this job for 19 years, Whitfield said. "I've seen a great many people get close to men like Adrian Vescari. They don't usually look like you." "What do I look like?" she said, curious, without defensiveness. "Like someone who walked in accidentally and stayed on purpose," he said. "That's unusual. That's worth saying something about." She stopped at a red light. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because what you did," Whitfield said, "making that call, being the one to call it in, that was a choice you didn't have to make. You could have stayed at the edge of it. Let his people handle it in whatever way they handle things. You chose differently." "My friend was in that building," she said. "Yes," he said. "But also—" He stopped. Started again. "What you provided was clean, uncomplicated, true, and that's rarer than it should be." She sat with that as the light changed. "Thank you for calling personally," she said. "Take care of yourself, Ms. Bennett," he said. "Claire," she said. "Claire," he said. "Good luck." He ended the call. She sat in the moving car and thought about what he had said. Walked in accidentally. Stayed on purpose. She thought about whether that was true. She decided it was true. And she decided she was all right with that. Adrian called that afternoon while she was finally sleeping, and she saw the missed call when she woke at 2 and called him back. "I need to see you," he said. "Tonight if you're willing." "I'm working at 11, she said. "Before 11, he said. "All right," she said. "Come here." He came at 7. He came alone. No Torres in the hallway. No car outside with people watching the building. Just Adrian at the door, in clothes that were slightly less formal than she was used to seeing him in, still immaculate, still expensive, but less armored somehow. As if something had been slightly lowered. "You came by yourself," she said. "Torres is nearby," he said. "But yes, I came by myself." She let him in. They sat in the same places. They always sat, her on the arm of the chair, him on the couch, the low table between them. The geography of the conversations they had been having for 2 weeks, which felt somehow simultaneously like much longer and much shorter than 2 weeks. "I made a decision today," he said. "Tell me." The organization, he said. The restructuring I told you about. I'm not waiting. I'm starting it now, this week. She looked at him. People will push back, she said. Yes. Harder than you're expecting. Probably, he said. I've been underestimated before. Not by your own people, she said. No, he agreed. Not by them. He paused. But the people who stay through this, who stay while it's uncomfortable, while it costs them. Those are the people worth building with. You said something like that once. You said it first, she said. I just agreed. Did I? The night you told me about the restructuring. You said the people who stay, because the organization is worth staying in. He thought about it. Yes, he said. I did say that. So you're listening to yourself, she said. I'm trying to, he said. She watched him. He was fidgeting slightly with his watch, a small unconscious motion, the kind that surfaces in people who don't usually fidget, which told her the controlled exterior was covering something that needed to be said. There's something else, she said. He looked up. There's something else you came to say, she said. The restructuring isn't why you asked to see me tonight. You could have called that in. He was quiet. She waited. He said, I want to offer you something, and I don't know how you're going to receive it. Try, she said. I want to offer you a way out, he said. A completely clean one. New apartment if you want it, different building, your choice of location. Financial support while you decide what comes next if the job at St. Marcus feels changed by everything that happened. Your life rebuilt from this point entirely separate from me. She was quiet. You're trying to give me an exit, she said. I'm trying to give you a choice, he said. A real one. Not one shaped by proximity or obligation or the fact that things moved so fast that you never had a clean moment to decide what you actually wanted. And you, she said. I don't factor into it, he said. That's the point. You don't factor in, she said slowly. You who drove to my apartment at 3:42 in the morning because you needed to tell me in person. You who called me from your own number because I was the only person you'd talk to who wasn't working for you or trying to kill you. You who told me you would think about what kind of man you wanted to be and then actually did it. She stood up. He watched her. You're factoring yourself out of the equation, she said, because you think that's what fairness looks like. That offering me a clean exit is the respectful thing. Isn't it? He said. It would be, she said, if I wanted the exit. He said nothing. Do you know why I stopped for you on that road? She said. Harold Moss, he said quietly. She stopped. He saw her expression. You mentioned it, he said. The first night. The man who stopped for your mother on Route 47. She had said that. At 3:42 in the morning at her kitchen table, in a conversation she hadn't expected to remember this clearly. You remember that, she said. I remember everything you say, he said. It was said simply, without performance. She sat back down. Adrian, she said. Yes. I'm not leaving, she said. Not because I don't have a choice, because I'm making one. He looked at her. You understand what this is, he said. What my life is. I understand it better than you think, she said. I've been inside it for 2 weeks. I understand the structure, the reach of it, the things that won't change overnight and the things that will. It's complicated, he said. Everything worth anything is complicated, she said. I work in a hospital. I've never been afraid of complicated. You should be afraid of this kind of complicated. I'm not afraid of it, she said. I'm clear about it. Those are different things. He looked at her for a long time. The same look he'd given her from the car window on Ashland Avenue in the rain, when she'd asked if he needed help, and he had looked surprised, as if the question itself was unusual. What do you want? She said. Not what you're offering me. What do you actually want? The silence lasted long enough that it told her he was not accustomed to being asked that question. I want to see who I become, he said finally. With someone who doesn't need me to be anything except honest. She held that. Then be honest, she said. That's all I've ever asked. He looked at her. I don't want you to leave, he said. I know, she said. I haven't known what to do with you since the night you made me sit down at your kitchen table, he said. I don't have a category for someone like you. You don't need a category, she said. You just need to be present. I'm trying, he said. You're doing better than you think, she said. He looked at her, and the thing in his face she had been trying to name for 2 weeks, finally landed with a name attached to it. It was hope. Not grand, not declared. Just quiet and real and slightly uncertain of its own welcome. A man who had spent 20 years using fear as his foundation, sitting across from a woman who offered something else entirely, deciding whether to trust the floor would hold. I'm going to work at 11, she said. I know. You should eat something and then go get whatever sleep Torres says you haven't been getting. He told you that. He did. I'm going to have a conversation with Torres about what he volunteers to you. Don't, she said. I asked him. He answered. That's how conversations work. He almost smiled. Go, she said. I'll call you after my shift. He stood. He stood at the door, and he looked at her, the way he had looked at her from the car on Ashland Avenue. The same look, but deepened now 2 weeks in a war and several honest conversations later. Thank you, he said, for the third time, with the same weight as all the other times and more besides. You're going to stop thanking me eventually, she said. Probably not, he said. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Claire. He left. She stood alone in the apartment, and she thought about hope, about what it looked like on the face of someone who had almost forgotten they were allowed to have it, about what it felt like to watch it arrive. She thought about Harold Moss, who had stopped on Route 47 in February because it wasn't something a person just drove past. She thought about a road in the rain and a man standing alone in it. She thought about every choice between that moment and this one, and how each choice had led in its own way to precisely here. And she thought about what she had told Kim at the nurse's station at 4 in the morning. You hold one thing at a time. Right now, the one thing was this: a man who was choosing to become better, and a woman who had decided with full clarity and no obligation to be present while he did. That was enough. For tonight, that was entirely enough. 3 months passed. Not quietly. Nothing in Adrian Vescari's world passed quietly, but with a different quality than the 2 weeks that had preceded them. Less like a storm, and more like the work that happens after a storm, which is less dramatic and considerably harder and absolutely necessary if anything is going to be built on the cleared ground. Claire moved back to her apartment on the 3rd day after Renata was safe. She packed her single bag, thanked Torres with a handshake, he accepted with a small nod, and went home to her 3rd-floor apartment with the opinionated building, and the bookshelf that was still overfull, and the stack of medical journals she had been meaning to organize since September, and now had no intention of organizing because they were hers, and she had missed them. She walked in, set her bag down, stood in the center of her own space, and breathed. Then she put this kettle on and called Renata. Renata came over within 40 minutes, carrying food she had made herself, which was how Renata processed things she couldn't control by making food and bringing it to people she loved, and she sat at Claire's kitchen table and looked at the chair where Adrian had sat on the first night and said, "So that's the chair." "That's the chair," Claire confirmed. "It looks like a regular chair." "It is a regular chair." Renata looked at her. "Tell me everything," she said. So Claire told her everything. The full version this time, not the abbreviated one. From the road in the rain, to the tea at 3:42 in the morning, to the anonymous call to her personal phone, to the conversation in the apartment when she had said, "I am not leaving, not because I don't have a choice, because I'm making one." Renata listened without interrupting, which was not something Renata did easily or often, which told Claire how seriously she was taking all of it. When Claire finished, Renata was quiet for a moment. "You said that to him," she said. "That you were making a choice." "Yes." "And what did he say?" "He said he didn't want me to leave." Renata looked at her for a long moment. "How did he say it?" she said. Claire thought about the way he had said it, the quality of it, the absence of performance. "Like it cost him something to admit," she said. Renata nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay, Claire repeated. I told you to see it clearly, Renata said. I didn't tell you to walk away from it. I told you to see it clearly and then decide. You saw it clearly. You're not going to warn me again. I'm going to say one more thing, Renata said. And then I'm going to eat this food I made and let you live your life. Say it. He is still who he is, Renata said. That doesn't disappear because he's trying to be different. You know that. I know that, Claire said. And you're all right with it. I'm clear about it, Claire said. Which is different from all right, but it's honest. Renata looked at her for a long moment. Then she served the food. Adrian called every day, not always for long. Sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 40. Sometimes in the morning before her shifts, and sometimes late after them. He called to tell her things, not performed updates, not strategic briefings, but actual things. The conversation that went badly with one of the senior managers who refused the restructuring and left. The one that went unexpectedly well with a man named Carver, who had been with the organization for 15 years, and said, when Adrian told him the new direction, that he had been waiting for this conversation for 8 years. He called to tell her about Carver specifically. He said that, she said. 8 years. He said he stayed because of the protection it offered his family, Adrian said. Not because he believed in what the organization was. And he said the difference between those two things had been wearing on him for a long time. What did you say to him? I said I understood that, Adrian said. And I meant it. She was quiet for a moment. You're building something different, she said. Trying to, he said. Slowly. Slowly is fine, she said. Slowly means it's real. He called to tell her when Brennan confirmed that the federal investigation had formally redirected, that the case file that had existed under his name for 2 years had been restructured in light of the evidence found at Marcus's location, and the testimony that Marcus himself, in his bid for prosecutorial cooperation, had provided, which had the unintended effect of demonstrating clearly how much of the original case against Adrian had been manufactured narrative rather than documented fact. It doesn't close everything, Brennan had told him. Some exposure remains, always will. Adrian told Claire exactly what Brennan had said, the full version, including the exposure that remained. I'm not telling you this to worry you, he said. I know, she said. I'm telling you because you told me to stop protecting you from the shape of things. I remember, she said. Thank you. A pause. That's the first time you've thanked me, he said. She hadn't realized, but he was right. It won't be the last, she said. He called to tell her about Marcus's sentencing hearing, which happened 6 weeks in. Marcus Bellini received 14 years on the federal charges with the kidnapping conviction. Renata's kidnapping adding the determinative weight to the sentencing recommendation. Whitfield's office had pushed hard on that charge specifically. When Adrian told her the number, she was quiet for a moment. How do you feel about it? She asked. He was quiet too. Relieved, he said finally. Not satisfied. There's a difference. There is, she said. I thought I'd feel something else, he said. Something more. But relief is what arrived. That's honest, she said. I'm trying to be, he said. She thought about what Whitfield had said. The person who walked in accidentally and stayed on purpose. She thought about what it meant to stay on purpose, not blindly, not without seeing clearly, but with full knowledge of what was in the room and the decision to remain in it. Adrian, she said. Yes, I want to have dinner with you, she said. Not a check-in call, not in an apartment arranged for security reasons. Dinner, somewhere ordinary, where you're just a person and I'm just a person. Silence. Ordinary, he said. That's not a word that appears frequently in my life. I know, she said. That's why I'm suggesting it. A pause. There's a place on Clark Street, he said. It's quiet, not complicated. Perfect, she said. Saturday. Saturday, he agreed. Saturday came, and Adrian was already there when she arrived, which she had not expected, and which told her something about him that she filed carefully. He was at a corner table, no visible security, dressed in a way that was still unmistakably him, but with the volume slightly lowered, a dark jacket, no tie, his phone face down on the table instead of in his hand. She sat down. He looked at her. "You're on time," he said. "I'm always on time," she said. "Nurses are constitutionally incapable of being late. It gets trained out of us." "Is there anything that gets trained into you?" he asked. "That you didn't have before?" She considered this honestly. "The ability to be present inside things that are frightening," she said. "Most people, when something frightens them, they either run or freeze. Nursing teaches you a third option. You stay, you function, and you deal with the fear on the other side when there's time." He looked at her. "You did that with me," he said. "From the first night." "Yes," she said. "You were frightened." "At points," she said. "Yes. But you stayed." "I stayed." He picked up the menu and looked at it, and then set it back down. "Claire," he said. "Yes. I want to ask you something, and I want you to understand that there is no correct answer and no expectation attached to the question." "Ask it," she said. "What is this?" he said. "Between us, what do you think this is?" She looked at him across the table. Outside Chicago moved around them, the traffic and the voices and the particular living hum of a city on a Saturday evening that knew nothing about either of them and required nothing from either of them. "I think it's something that hasn't finished becoming itself yet," she said, "which is the most honest thing I can say." "That doesn't frighten you." "Unfinished things don't frighten me," she said. "That's the other thing nursing teaches you. Most important things are unfinished for a very long time." He looked at her. "Most people would want a cleaner answer," he said. "I'm not most people, Adrian," she said. "No," he said, "you're not." The food came, and they ate, and they talked, not about the organization, or the restructuring, or Whitfield, or Marcus, or any of the things that had occupied 2 weeks of their lives. They talked about other things. He told her about a book he had read as a teenager that had been the first thing that made him understand that the world was larger than the one he was living inside. She told him about Route 47 in February, the full story this time with details. She hadn't included the first night, the way her mother had kept singing softly to keep them both calm. Old songs she barely remembered, and how Claire had understood in the cold dark of that car that the person you became in the worst moments was the truest version of you. He listened to that, the way he listened to everything she said completely, without looking at his phone, without the divided attention that had become the modern condition of existing. "You've been the truest version of yourself through all of this," he said. "I've been myself," she said. "I don't have another version to switch to." "That's what I mean," he said. She picked up her water glass. "What about you?" she said. "Who is the truest version of you?" He thought about it. I thought about it long enough that she knew he was taking the question seriously, rather than reaching for a prepared answer. "I think I'm still finding out," he said. "Good," she said. "That means you're paying attention." The second twist arrived on a Tuesday morning, 8 weeks after the dinner on Clark Street, in the form of a phone call from Torres that woke her at 6:38. "We have a situation," Torres said. She was already sitting up. "Tell me." "One of Marcus's associates," Torres said. "A man named Vega, who we did not identify during the internal review. He's been quiet for 3 months. He moved last night." "Moved how?" "He attempted to access Claire's employment records at St. Marcus," Torres said. "Hospital security flagged an unauthorized inquiry. The inquiry came from an IP address we've traced to a third-party firm Vega has used before." She sat very still. "He's trying to find my schedule," she said. "That's what it indicates." "Does Adrian know?" "I'm calling you simultaneously," Torres said. "He's on the other line." "I'll call him after," she said. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to go to the hospital today as normal," Torres said. "Don't change anything. We want Vega to believe the access attempt went undetected." "You're going to use my schedule as bait," she said. "We're going to use the appearance of your schedule," Torres said carefully. You won't be exposed. You have my word. She thought for a moment. Your word or Adrian's, she said. Both, Torres said. She closed her eyes briefly. 3 months. 3 months of slowly re-establishing the texture of ordinary life, of going to work and coming home and having phone calls that were about books and Route 47 and what the truest version of a person was, of starting to believe, not naively but measurably, that the worst of it was behind them. And now this. All right, she said. Tell me exactly what I need to do. Adrian was at her building in 40 minutes. He came up to her apartment this time, the first time he had been back since the night he had made tea, and she had asked to know everything. He stood in the center of her space and looked at it the way she had not seen him look at anything, carefully, quietly, as if it meant something to him that she had come back here to this particular apartment with the overfull bookshelf and the medical journals. Tell me about Vega, she said. He told her. Gerald Vega, 51 years old. He had been in Marcus's parallel structure from the beginning, but had operated entirely separately from the network. Torres had identified a separate cell, deliberately disconnected, designed exactly for this scenario. Insurance. If Marcus fell, Vega activated. Marcus built a failsafe, she said. Yes. He built it specifically to operate after his own arrest. Yes. He was that certain he might fail, she said. Marcus always had 2 plans, Adrian said. That was the thing I missed about him. He always had a plan for the plan failing. She looked at him. How dangerous is Vega, she said. Dangerous enough to take seriously, Adrian said. Not as dangerous as Marcus. He's an executor, not a strategist. He doesn't build things. He finishes them. What does finishing things mean in this context? Adrian held her gaze. It means he was given a specific task by Marcus before Marcus was arrested, he said, and he intends to complete it. And the task is me, she said. The task is hurting you to hurt me, Adrian said. Yes. She absorbed that. Because Marcus knew, she said slowly. He knew what you had done by going to my apartment that night. He knew what it meant that you went in person. He built a failsafe around the one thing he correctly identified as your vulnerability. Adrian said nothing, because it was true. I'm your vulnerability, she said, not as an accusation, as a fact that needed to be spoken cleanly. Yes, Adrian said. And you're angry about it, she said. I'm angry at myself, he said, for allowing a situation to develop where someone who has nothing to do with my world is a target because of her connection to me. I chose the connection, she said. You offered me an exit. Remember, that doesn't change. Adrian, she stepped forward. Stop taking responsibility for my choices. I made them. They're mine. What I need right now is not you being angry at yourself. What I need is for us to be very clear-headed about what happens next. He looked at her. Something moved across his face. The same thing that had been moving across his face incrementally, across 3 months and several honest conversations. The thing she had watched arrive piece by piece, the willingness to be redirected by someone who cared about him and was not afraid of him. Torres has a plan, he said. I know. Tell me the details. He told her. The appearance of her schedule, as Torres had said. Her car driven by someone else on her usual route. An approach path that Vega would recognize as consistent with her pattern. And at every point where the approach created a moment of exposure, Torres's people positioned and waiting. They'll take him on the approach, Adrian said, before he reaches anything that matters. And if something goes wrong, she said. I'll be 2 blocks away, he said. With Torres. You'll be 2 blocks away, she repeated. Yes. Not at the scene. No. Because you at the scene creates a federal complication. Yes, he said. Brennan was very clear about that. She looked at him. 2 blocks away, she said. Yes. Promise me. He looked at her. Claire. Promise me, she said. You stay 2 blocks away. You let Torres do his job. You do not make this about the need to be present at something you can't control. He was quiet for a moment. I promise, he said. Say it like you mean it, she said. I promise, he said again. And the second time was different, more settled, more weighted. She nodded. Then let's do this, she said. It happened on a Wednesday. Claire spent the morning at her apartment doing the ordinary things she would normally do on a morning before a shift coffee. The news a call to Renata that she kept carefully normal in content, because Renata didn't need to know the specific texture of what was happening and couldn't be asked to perform ordinary conversation while knowing it. At 9:15, Torres's person drove Claire's car out of the parking garage on her usual schedule. At 9:47, Torres called her. Vega is following the vehicle, he said. He picked it up 3 blocks from your building, exactly where we expected. She was standing in her apartment. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was deliberate and rhythmic. All right, she said. Adrian is in position, Torres said. 2 blocks east of the intercept point. You told him I asked for the promise, she said. I told him, Torres said. He didn't argue. Good. She waited. The next 12 minutes were the longest 12 minutes she had experienced since the night she sat in the break room at St. Marcus, after the anonymous phone call, holding anger like a tool. At 10:02, Torres called again. It's done, he said. She closed her eyes. Vega, she said. In custody, Torres said. Physically unharmed. 3 of my people and 2 federal contacts who Whitfield authorized independently. Clean, documented, no complications. No one was hurt. No one was hurt. She let out a breath. And Adrian, she said. 2 blocks east, Torres said. He didn't move. She felt something release in her chest that she had been holding for 6 days without fully knowing she was holding it. Thank you, Daniel, she said. Of course, he said. She put the phone down. She stood in her apartment and she thought about the word done. The full weight of it. Not the end of everything. Adrian had been clear that some exposure always remained, that the world his name existed in did not become simple overnight or over 3 months. But done in the specific sense of the thing that was built to hurt her had been stopped and everyone was accounted for and the ground under her feet was solid. Her regular phone rang. Adrian. I heard, she said. I stayed 2 blocks east, he said. I know. The whole 12 minutes, he said. It was, he stopped. Hard, she said. Very, he said. But you stayed. I stayed. She sat down on the couch. Come over, she said. Please. I was there in 9 minutes. He came through the door, and he stood in her apartment, and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment. The silence that exists between people when words would be too small for what's in the room. Then she said, sit down. He sat down. She made tea. She brought it to the table and sat across from him, and they sat with the tea going warm between their hands and the city going about its business outside, and the specific quality of an ending that wasn't quite an ending, but was the closest thing to one that real life ever offered. I want to tell you something, he said. Tell me, she said. That night on Ashland Avenue, he said. When you stopped the car and rolled down the window, I had been standing there for 40 minutes. She looked at him. 40 minutes, she said. 14 cars passed, he said. I counted. I wasn't counting because I needed help. I was counting because... He stopped, started again. Because at some point it became something else. It became evidence. Evidence for a thing I had been believing for a long time without saying it out loud. What thing? She said. That people don't stop, he said. For each other. Not really. Not without a reason that benefits them. She was quiet. And then you stopped, he said. And then I stopped, she said. Without knowing who I was, he said. Without any possible benefit to yourself. In the middle of a storm at the end of a 12-hour shift on your way home to somewhere warm. I told you why I stopped, she said. Harold Moss, he said. Harold Moss, she confirmed. A man who stopped for your mother because it wasn't something a person just drove past. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about that, he said. About what it means to be someone who doesn't just drive past. I've been thinking about it for 3 months. And, she said. And I think I've spent 20 years driving past, he said. Not on roads, in rooms, in conversations. In every situation where the choice was between stopping and staying comfortable, I kept moving. She looked at him. You stopped for Carver, she said. When he told you he'd been waiting 8 years, you stopped and you actually listened. Because of you, he said. No, she said. Because of you. I showed you the possibility. You made the choice. He looked at her. There's a difference, she said. You keep telling me that, he said, when I try to give you credit for my choices. Because it's important, she said. You have to own what you're building. If it belongs to me, it disappears when I do. If it belongs to you, it stays. He was quiet for a moment. You're not planning on disappearing, he said. No, she said. I'm not. But you're making the point anyway. I'm making the point because it's true, she said. You are changing because you decided to. I'm here because I chose to be. Those are two separate things that happen to be occupying the same space. He looked at her. The same space, he said. The same space, she confirmed. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. It was brief. A few seconds. He pulled it back. But it happened. And this time, she was the one who looked at the table where his hand had been, and then back up at him, and whatever was in her expression was something she didn't try to manage or edit. Adrian, she said. Yes. I want to ask you something. Ask it. 3 months ago, she said. You described yourself as someone who was still finding out who the truest version of him was. Yes, he said. Do you have a better answer now? He thought about it. He looked at the table, at the mugs, at the stack of medical journals she still hadn't organized and clearly never would. He looked at the bookshelf and the work shoes by the door and all the ordinary evidence of a life lived simply and without apology. Someone who stops, he said finally. She looked at him. That's who I want to be, he said. Someone who sees a person in difficulty and doesn't calculate the cost of stopping. Someone who doesn't drive past. That's a good answer, she said softly. It took me 3 months, he said. Some answers take longer, she said. That doesn't make them less true. He looked at her with something clear and steady in his face, the hope she had named 4 weeks ago still present, less uncertain of its welcome, now something it was allowing itself to become. What happens next, he said. You keep building, she said. Slowly and honestly. Carver and the others who stay because it's worth staying. The legitimate businesses that take longer but mean something. The structure that runs on trust instead of fear. And us, he said. We keep talking, she said. Honestly, in person when it matters. We see what this becomes without rushing it into a shape it isn't ready for. That requires patience, he said. Do you have patience? I'm learning, he said. So am I, she said. 6 months after a storm-swept Tuesday night on Ashland Avenue, Claire drove that road again. Not for any particular reason. She had finished a shift. She was tired in the good way, the way that meant the work had been real and she had done it well. And she found herself on Ashland without entirely deciding to be there, the way a person sometimes takes a route that means something without acknowledging that they're taking it on purpose. She drove slowly. She passed the spot. It was just a road. Unremarkable in the way that all significant places are unremarkable from the outside. Nothing. Marking what had happened there. No evidence that on a specific night in a specific storm, a woman in an old car had stopped for a man standing alone in the rain and changed the direction of both their lives. She stopped the car. She sat there for a moment. She thought about 14 cars that had driven past. She thought about the 40 minutes of counting. She thought about a retired teacher named Harold Moss, who had stopped in February on Route 47 because it wasn't something a person just drove past, and how that single decision had moved forward through time and landed decades later in the form of a woman who had learned from it and carried it and acted on it in a storm. She thought about how actions moved, not in straight lines, in waves, touching things you couldn't see from where you stood when you made them. Her phone rang. Adrian, she answered. "Where are you?" he said. "Ashland Avenue," she said. A pause. "The spot," he said. "The spot," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "How does it look?" he said. "Like a road," she said. "Just a road." "Is that strange?" he said. "A little," she said. "And not at all." He was quiet again. Then, "I'm having dinner with Carver tomorrow. He's bringing 2 men he says want to be part of what we're building. He says they're good people." "Are they?" "Torres ran them," Adrian said. "They are." "Then dinner with Carver sounds like exactly the right thing," she said. "Yes," he said. "I think so too." "Adrian." "Yes." "How are you?" she asked. Not strategically, not as a check-in. The genuine question asked directly the way she had been asking it for 6 months. He thought about it. "Better than I was," he said. "More than I expected to be." "That's honest," she said. "I'm trying," he said. "I know," she said. "I see it." She looked through the windshield at the road. She thought about who she had been before this road, and who she was on it, and who she was becoming on the other side of it. She thought about the fact that becoming was not a destination, that the truest version of any person was not a fixed point you arrived at and stayed, but something you kept choosing in small decisions and large ones in storms and in ordinary light. In the moments when staying was harder than leaving and you stayed anyway. She thought about the word stopped, all the ways it could mean something. She put the car in drive. "I'll call you after my shift tomorrow," she said. "I'll answer," he said. She smiled. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Claire." She drove. The city opened up around her, its noise and its light, and its 5 million people going about the business of being alive. Each of them carrying their own version of Route 47 in February. Their own Harold Moss. Their own moment on a road in the rain that they hadn't expected and couldn't have planned for, and that changed quietly and permanently who they were allowed to become. Claire Bennett had stopped for a stranger because she had been taught in the cold dark of a broken-down car by a woman who sang to keep them both calm. That stopping was what decent people did. That was all. That had been everything. And Adrian Vescari, a man who had spent 20 years building walls out of fear and calling it strength, had been changed not by force, not by strategy, not by anything in his own considerable arsenal, but by the simplest act one person could offer another. Someone saw him. Someone stopped. Someone said, "Get in before we both drown." And he had finally, after 40 minutes and 14 cars and 20 years of driving past things that deserved to be stopped, gotten in. Not because he had been commanded. Not because he was afraid. Because someone had offered him something that all the power he had accumulated could not manufacture, could not purchase, and could not survive without. The choice to be seen as he actually was by someone who looked clearly and chose to stay. That was the thing Claire Bennett had given him on a road in the rain. And that was the thing he intended for the rest of his life to deserve.